Hey, it is 5:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, December 16, 2014. This is Apibal. Today, I received a message about Alaska again. Now, some people may ask, how do you know that it's a message? Well, it's a combination of intuition, inner knowing, validation of messages from sources, from different clues. And the more that you are in tune, or the more that I am in tune with the source, the easier it is to understand what messages I'm receiving. Now, this is about a trip to Alaska. In 2012, it was the first time the source had put the idea of me going to Alaska. I'm not really I don't really remember exactly when this dream vision happened, but I know it happened before I went into first step rehab for 3 days in June of 2012. In the dream, I saw a map of the United States, and then I saw a dot in Florida, and it drew itself all the way to Alaska. I don't exactly remember the rest of that dream, but I saw the map. I remember the map clearly. I thought that was interesting. So I thought at the time I thought I was gonna end up going, because I was trying to get out of Florida at the time in 2012 with all the chaos that was going on in my life. I thought I was gonna go to Alaska, but at the same time the universe was also putting California in my head. So it was kind of conflicting messages at the time, but I knew I was gonna go somewhere. I just didn't know when, right? And then I thought it was interesting, so I thought, okay, in 2012, all this listening to messages I was still not very good at it. I was still in an early stage of coming back to listening to the signs. So to me, it was like, okay, interesting. But then I went into first step rehab in June for 3 days. The first night that I was there, I was at their AA meeting in there. And then after the meeting, this white guy, he's a good-looking white guy, he came up to me, and out of nowhere, he just come up to me, just start talking to me. He didn't ask me, how are you doing, shit like that. He just come up and start talking to me. He said, he told me a story, he told me a long story about how he became sober, and that when he became sober, he took a bicycle trip from Florida all the way to Alaska. And I was asking him, how is that even possible? He told me that anything is possible. You just have to have faith. I have to go back and look at my journal. I wrote it down that day. I'll put it up. And of course, it made me think about the dream that I had. It's like, okay, this guy just came up to me out of nowhere and told me about his trip from Florida to Alaska once he becomes sober. So I know the source wants me to become sober. I know that, but I was being stubborn the whole entire time as well. But at the same time, I cannot fault my journey because everything's supposed to happen, okay? It's hard to explain all this, so let's just focus on this. It's hard to explain the master divine plan of how it all works on the smaller scale, but so I didn't think much about it, I just, okay, God's telling me I'm gonna go to Alaska, obviously, but I just don't know how it's gonna happen. And at the time, I was also dealing with a bunch of crazy shit in my life. I was like, whatever, right? And then, of course, I ended up having another dream then after after first step telling me that I was... Well, in the dream, it didn't tell me I was gonna be in Texas, because Matthew was also in the dream. So in my dream, I thought Matthew was gonna be in Texas. Like, I thought he was gonna leave me and go to Texas, but it ended up being me who was going to Texas. So the Alaska thing went away. And it was reminded to me again in 2013 about Alaska, but it was also reminding about California. So I was a little bit confused, but at the same time, Alaska was like, okay, if my vision showed me from Florida to Alaska, how is that gonna happen? You know, it just like was really confusing at the time. And but then I did go to Austin, just as the source told me to go to Austin way before I was supposed to go to Texas. I didn't know it was gonna be Austin. That story will be like we put back up. Will be put up. So I was in Austin. I knew that I was gonna go to Chicago, and it happened. So while I was in Chicago, the source or whatever they are told me to go to San Diego, and that the devil wants me. So having to test, having to like figure that at the time I was like trying to like see if all this stuff is true. Like, it's my path to listen to all these messages. So I did, even though it was like painful. It was going to be one of the most difficult trips I ever made in my life, because I had to do it all on my own without knowing the outcome. So I did. So Alaska was obviously out of my mind then, because at the time I was kind of like thinking maybe California, Alaska messages kind of like together, because it's on the both on the same coastline. So, and the fact that I was not in Florida, and I just didn't know when and if I was going to come back to Florida. So I thought by going to California, I had already completed that Alaska or whatever, right? But at the same time, the universe keeps telling me that I'm going to be back in California again. Like, that San Diego trip was not the end. And then I had a dream during the full moon about me being in California again. So obviously the universe is reminding me that there will come a time where I'm going to be in California again. But then, so I don't know how that's going to happen. But then today, this morning, I made a telephone call after I saw the number. I saw the activation code 929. And I later remember, oh yeah, I want to make a make an appointment for my haircut. So I called and I accidentally used the wrong person's name. Like, I call the girl, I say, oh, I want to make an appointment with Heather when my girl is Megan. So the girl on the phone is like, Heather is not here anymore. She moved to Alaska with her family. I was like, what? Really? I thought she's from Florida. But then later, like, she looked in my record and she was like, did you mean Megan? I said, oh, maybe that's it, But the point is, the universe reminded me about Alaska again. Because when she told me about Alaska, I saw the activation code 949. And intuitively, I just know that the universe is reminding me about Alaska. It keeps coming up. Then I saw, of course, I also saw activation code 345. And just later, 457 again. So it's so funny that 457 started on the Tuesday that I was at church to celebrate Thanksgiving before Thanksgiving Thursday. And that was the day that I decided to become engaged to the source, which I'll talk about that later. So, I posted on Facebook after I got that message, like, why why is the universe or the source keeps telling me to go to Alaska? Like, what is there? Because they never told me what's there. And Jackson replied, there are energy vortex, and there are also Native American spiritual mecca, which makes sense because the universe since last year has been telling me about these energy great vortex, and I'm supposed to be going to Sedona, Texas, Arizona, to connect with one of them, and supposedly Colorado. I don't know if that's gonna happen. And apparently now there's one in Alaska, right? I didn't know that. Then Sarah came into work. I guess she saw my Facebook post. She said, oh, I want to tell you something about Alaska. She said, like, I read something about Alaska like a night or two before about FEMA. So that was another validity. Validation of the message. So when I got home from work, I looked up what is the meaning of Alaska. And I found out that Alaska is actually a Russian word taken from a word Alaska or something of the Aleut people, which linked me to the Aleutian Islands. The Aleut people are the original native people in that area, and they are also considered to be the first human something in that, like, the cross over to America. So they are the original. And as I was looking at it, Aleutian Island is part hold on. The islands has a lot of volcanoes, and is in the northern part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now, the Pacific Ring of Fire is not the first time that I heard about this. I do not remember exactly when the Pacific Ring of Fire was put into my consciousness, but this is just connecting the dot to where I need to go. Kind of that same thing how I knew I need to go to Austin after Origins, from South Hattie Island to Austin, because I had two choices at the time where I wanted to go. And I find it interesting that this section has to do with the I'm hungry. With the Titanic, how do you say that, plate, and it's where all the fault line, that one big fault line, is around the volcano, and it's also linked to California. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is the message that the source has been giving me about the mix between Alaska and California is starting to make sense. There's a link between those two. And that's why they've been mixing it up with me since 2012 about California and Alaska. And it's kind of like telling me that there is a link to it that I need to pay attention to. So now I just have to wait for the next instruction of how the plan is going to be carried out and how the trip is going to transpire, because it will be taken care of. Just like my trip to Texas, Austin, Chicago, San Diego. So I will find out, and I will talk about it some more. This is Nattawat Apibal, erasing my doubts.